there's no tool that's going to totally do our work yet. I think the thing that I heard most is just the idea of these AI agents that we can now go and create an agent within ChatGPT, and you can create tasks for that agent to complete, but you still have to set it up and build it. So I heard a lot about agentic AI. I heard a lot about humans still needing to be involved.
Welcome to Contrary to Popular Opinion, a podcast hosted by Vujade Digital. In each episode, we bring you provocative topics and novel perspectives around leadership, business, and marketing that defy the norms because exponential growth demands unconventional thinking and visionary action. So open your mind and let's get into this week's episode.
Hey everyone, Kelly McGuire with Vujade Digital. Excited to get into today's topic.
Hey everybody, this is Todd, Kelly's partner, and sorry we missed a week or two. We were out and about doing the work thing and could not find time to record the podcast, so we're back. And I'm fresh out of a conference the last couple of weeks, an agency-specific conference, and one of the entire tracks, both days of the conference, was on all the AI stuff that's going on in our world. And so we've got a list of 4 or 5 sort of themes to go through. And because Kelly and I love to debate this topic, this time I'm going to let him query me or Q&A with me instead of me driving. And I'll set things up and then we can kick off with where we have disagreements or radically different ideas about things, or just simply different use of vernacular and words and how we describe things. But those words actually might mean something. So let's get into it. What's your first topic you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in terms of kind of kicking it off, as you said, you kind of came from this event. We've debated this a lot recently. I'd love to hear just more about what you're hearing, kind of what's piqued your interest on these AI things, kind of what you've brought up to me on some of those things. And then, yeah, I think we can dive into some of the specifics of what's come out of that.
All right. Well, one of the common words being thrown around now is agentic AI. So the last 12 months, we've had AI everything, right? Every version of ChatGPT coming out, to Gemini, to Perplexity, to, all the other tools. And there's a couple that are starting to bubble up in the agency sort of marketing services area. But I do want to be specific about the term agentic AI, which statistically or matter-of-factly means AI that's autonomous and does not require human involvement. And that's a wild sort of thing to think about. And it was brought up a lot and seems to be where the next evolution of AI is. I have no idea when or how a true agentic AI model will make an impact in the marketing services space that we're in, because I think what you and I will agree on today throughout these topics is humans are still very much required. And most of what I heard from the panelists and the speakers, and these are from people from some of the biggest agencies and the biggest holdcos down to, brands, to the more smaller boutique indie companies like ours. But I did hear a lot of common sort of similarities with how AI is being used, that it still very much requires humans, that agentic AI is a thing, but it's not really a thing yet. There's no tool that's going to totally do our work yet. I think the thing that I heard most is just the idea of these AI agents that we can now go and create an agent within ChatGPT, and you can create tasks for that agent to complete, but you still have to set it up and build it. So I heard a lot about agentic AI. I heard a lot about humans still needing to be involved.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really where I still struggle in kind of seeing the future and the usefulness and all of this, and where I think we will sometimes diverge in our opinions on this, although I wouldn't say always completely opposite ends of it. For me, as I'm getting more and more into the AI areas and exploring the different models, I continue to see it's incredibly valuable. There's no one's arguing those types of things, but it still continues to be like anything else, where it's really it's a tool, as you said, it's only as good as what you put in and what you get out. And more importantly on that, it's more iterative and complicated than that. It's rare that you get a perfect prompt or a perfect expectation all put together, you put it in, and the output's ready to go. I liken it to this old experience that you and I have had around creative, because, you're more creative than I am. I'm not a creative person. But a lot of times when it came to creative stuff, I wouldn't always know exactly what to ask for. It was more of a, I'll know it when I see it, and giving the best description I could, getting some kind of options or feedback, and then being able to have something spark an idea and a path of thought and to carry that forward and say, okay, I like that foundation. What if we did this and move this color and change that and turn it into that? And that turns into something that's iterative. And that experience is very similar to what I have in the AI space, where the core, the output, the description of knowing what to ask, I think takes a lot of experience and understanding to truly have the nugget and of a vision of what you want. And that then can take you down a path of exploration and modification and iteration that leads to really incredible things. And I've said this to kind of our analytics teams before. One of those powerful things I've seen out of it is, before, if I had a thought around, well, I wonder if this thing would show correlation or show a relationship if we looked at it. And if I wanted the analytics team to do that, it would be a whole day's worth of work to do an Excel table and charts and pictures and everything, only to maybe find out if what I was thinking actually isn't valuable and now it's all wasted. And so I had to be really picky and choosy about which ones I actually wanted to take the time and the investment and the resource around to explore, because I could run into a dead end and then it's a lot of wasted time. But now I can explore questions and ask things of what if, can you see this? And it can show this nugget of maybe there's something there. Maybe it's worth taking further and moving further. And you can do that. And that's where you get the 100x unlock of, you can ask all these hypothetical situations, figure out which ones might be viable, and have a process that can do. You don't have to have a research team and a coder and an Excel wizard and all these things that have to come together to make it happen. All those things are in there. You just have to know how to describe and unpack and peel away the onion layers. And as I'm describing that, that's what reinforces my idea that it is an enhancement to intelligence and brilliance and ideas and creativity to get you to things. It's not just a replacement. It's not just, it'll do it for you. It's not just the easy button where you press it in and it's all done. And I think there's a big misconception around that, because again, you have to use the right tool. Like, I even find that the models you have to use are very different. Like, if I have to use the reasoning tools versus the output tools versus the research tools, because if you use the wrong one, it can really take you off track really quickly in terms of what you get. And then the iteration is very interesting, because those can get off track really fast. Whereas you iterate and build, it starts to, you've heard the terms hallucinate and it'll do math and things like that. The whole idea of agentic AI being self-sustaining, when I see the mistakes and errors that happen with the human involvement, that's very interesting to me to think about relying on something without that kind of oversight, when I see how quickly things get off the tracks as it is right now with that human intervention.
Yeah, I think I would sum it up based on the conference is that we're in an era or a moment in time where I would label it maybe almost like human-driven AI, which is sort of an oxymoron, I guess, or whatever the word for that would be. But human-driven AI is what you're describing, which is, we're not in an agentic era yet. The AI is not capable of full autonomous operation without human involvement. So therefore, we're in a human-driven AI workflow or moment in time. And I think that'll hold true in the marketing services industry that we're in, analytics, marketing services, things, for probably quite some time, because it's not a totally programmable environment. There is a lot of nuance to human behavior. I think it's why I tell my daughter she might be safe in a career in psychology and brain sciences, because I don't know that AI is going to replace that job anytime soon. But I want to talk about, in the agency world specifically, or the marketing services world specifically, what were the key themes that I took away from this? And this is where you and I had the debate prior to this, or maybe it was because I was in this and I was bringing this up, was this idea of building and your sort of conflict with the word build. And I kept saying, well, we need to build things. You're like, we're not building anything. And I'm like, no, we are building something. You're like, no, we're not building something. And I'm like, but the idea of building, and one of the agency or marketing services panelists in one of the tracks said that, none of us in the marketing services world, and this includes where I saw agencies, I'm going to keep using the word build, but build an actual UI. So code, write, design, and develop a front-end UI that's using the back-end LLMs of a Perplexity and a Gemini and a Claude or whatever, but they are building and constructing the front-end UI that is being powered by those tools. And so the big holdcos, the big agencies, the common theme was they've got enough money and resources and engineering labor that they are able to create, really sort of fancy UIs that sit on top of these LLMs, right? And so I saw a couple of demos of agency owned and operated proprietary UI interfaces that they've given, a name to. And they're really interesting. And I guess there's two areas, maybe three. So the common areas were creative, how these tools are impacting the creative side of the business. So, and again, it wasn't that they're replacing creative. What the tools are doing, although there were agencies, I think it was the agency that did the Coca-Cola Christmas spot that was vintage Coca-Cola sort of moments, but it was done completely in AI, and Coca-Cola wanted to do that just to sort of show that it could be. So I did see fully AI driven content, but the majority of the agencies and the marketing services companies were talking about how creative AI allows them to ideate faster, to your point. They can get comps faster. They can get mood boards faster. They can get, photography or video or things that might not be the final product, but it can certainly create the storyboard and get them quicker to test and learn on concepts versus, maybe they focus group concepts faster because they can just create. They don't have to go shoot stuff, or they don't have to spend hours and hours and hours designing stuff, which segues to another AI theme that came up. So there's the creative side of things that agencies are using, obviously. But again, didn't hear that creative agency jobs are being replaced yet, that it was just more of, God, it's really hard to prompt these AI tools to get the right image or to get the right video or to get the right creative concept. You have to get really good at that, which is what you were just talking about. But one of the things that was talked about in doing that was the idea of how we used to do, probably are still going to be doing for some time, or at least a period of time, focus groups, where I remember in our old agency office, in one of our offices in Columbus, Ohio, we had a whole room built out that hosted people. And then there was like the two-way glass, and you could sit and observe people, and you could do focus groups, traditional focus groups. And now what I heard in this conference was how all these agencies are using a variety of the AI tools to create synthetic personas. And they're creating those by scripting and populating an AI tool with what that persona should be. So they're telling it, I want you to become this type of person and have these types of characteristics or traits or attributes. And I want you to be able to perform these tasks. And in some cases, which I thought was even more powerful, the demos that I saw were people who had taken their client's first party customer data and uploaded all that data in a way that trained, or to train for the purpose of training, the synthetic persona, so that it was now trained on all the history of information that brand or product already had amassed about it. So it's like this superhuman that knows everything about every human that's ever purchased said product or service. And then they're using that synthetic persona as the focus group. So it's like one AI persona that's like the power of like a million customers because it's been trained with all that data. And I am really fascinated about that particular sort of AI experiment. And so I'll go back to the word build. So there's agencies building front-end UIs on top of LLMs. There's agencies that are building synthetic personas. There's agencies that are building creative assets and content. And the idea of this becoming the new agency model is sort of the era we're in. But again, very much human-powered AI. So where do you sit on all of that? You said you've recently experimented with maybe some of this synthetic persona stuff. So,
I mean, it spins my head into a lot of thoughts, and I might try and express it some here in analogies, which we'll see if that's effective or takes me down a bad path or not. But where I have trouble is on the idea of build, because you can build, absolutely. But very few people, I think, are building the important part of what matters. The foundations. I mean, those are the LLMs, right? There's not people out there. There's very few people out there that are building the new ChatGPT or Perplexity, like the model that does most of the work, right? And so, I liken it to early days of programmatic, where you would see a new DSP come up or a new platform come up, and it would tout like, oh, we can manage all these campaigns and we have all these wizards and you can do all these input. And all you were doing was simplifying and streamlining what was truly powerful about the tool because it was cheaper, faster, easier. And everyone loved that and gravitated towards it. And it's like when I did the roadshow of all the DSPs and we ended up with the trade desk on it, looking behind the scenes and seeing what was possible, it confused me. And I was like, why is all I ever hear about faster, easier, cheaper, simpler when everything back here that can be done is better and more intuitive and deeper? It just takes a lot more intelligence and time and energy, and no one seems to care as much about that. And I say that because at the end of the day, it's really the access to the capability and the tool that's there and your willingness to use it and your skill set to use it that ultimately matters, right? And the analogy that may or may not work here that I'm going to try is it's like if you have a master artist, right? If you're Leonardo da Vinci or you're Vincent van Gogh and you can paint Starry Night, like you can take anything. You can take art, you can take a pencil, you can draw. You're great at it. You just need the tools available to you and the vision and the inspiration to go accomplish what you need to accomplish. And you can do that with anything. You can also take a picture of Starry Night and break it down into paint by numbers. And then anyone can go and do paint by numbers. And it's going to kind of look like Starry Night. But I don't think anyone's going to argue that the paint by numbers one should be hanging up in a museum and it's just as good. They're different. Like it's a scale of outcomes that you put in there. And so, yeah, you can quote unquote build on top of, you can create wizards, you can simplify it. But really what you're doing is you're empowering people to kind of paint by the numbers, follow the leader and you can get to some of these outcomes and you're just trying to streamline it and factory it, right? Again, I'll use another analogy. You're talking about like the Ford assembly line versus the handcrafted Ferrari. Both cars, they both get you somewhere, but they're different things in the same space of stuff. And so that's why I have a problem with the idea of build, because I think people try and use the term build like they've created something exclusive or new, or that someone who is good enough or talented enough couldn't replicate because it's proprietary and special to them.
It is. Those agencies that built those custom UIs on top of those LLMs would 1000% say, this is unique and proprietary to us.
I think anyone that knew what they were doing could look at what that tool that's built is doing and could just go to Gemini or ChatGPT and with enough knowledge can do the same thing. Now, it's more manual. You have to go through the process. You don't have a slick UI that does it. And you don't have these other things. But if you have the data sets and the knowledge base, the UI, the slick thing, isn't enabling something that you can't otherwise do on the foundational things. And I've always said that if there is something that is going to analyze a persona or do something with your data and all that, if it is useful, if it is valuable, someone out there is going to recognize that. They are going to build it and they're going to make it available for licensing and access. We've talked to people where it's like, we've talked to other agencies that have made investments in building things. And by the time they've built it, they've been passed by someone else whose sole focus was that feature that they were distracted by building.
That's what was talked about in this conference, is that marketing services firms aren't in the business of building the LLMs per se. What everyone's trying to do is create a layer on top. Right? Again, I said create or build or whatever that word is. They're trying to create a layer on top that demonstrates how they use the back end piece of it differently or more uniquely or more valuably than their next competitor, right? And so there's some agency out there saying they do media better than us because they've got a UI front end built on top of an LLM or a set of LLMs that allows them to identify audiences better or create better audiences or...
Okay, so stop right there. Allows them to identify audiences. There's no system that does that. There is a system that enables a person to go do that. So it might make it easier and better. It doesn't just magically do it. So it's still your agency that says they do it better still has to have a person good enough to use it to produce better. And you're still at the same thing. It's about the people that are working on the campaigns. It's not hire the agency that has a process and go plug and play any human being that just uses the tool. Everyone can use a hammer. There's master carpenters and there's people that'll smash their thumbs with it. There's differences, right? And so this is the difference is the idea that the tool itself is unique and empowering and offers an advantage when it's still the people that have access to tools. And like I said, even if an agency has gone through the process of building their tool, if it is valuable enough, I am willing to put on the line, I can't say it with 100% certainty, but just about anything you saw that was of value that someone has built, if I needed the outputs that it was doing it, I could go find a way to do it without having access to that person's tool. Someone has something that I can use and access and recreate because I understand the tools of it and the outputs of it can do it. So again, it might streamline it, might make it faster. It's back to the programmatic days. It might make it easier, faster, cheaper, more efficient for someone who's less talented to be able to do something similar. But at the end of the day, it doesn't actually lock you out. It's not some secret sauce thing that no one else has. It is just streamlining.
Yes, but in the business of operating a marketing services company, this is a different point, but to sort of debate what you're saying, what I would argue is we have to be competitive like any other company, right? So you use the car analogy again. One car is going to say it's got a certain type of steering mechanism, and another car company is going to say it's got a different type of steering mechanism. They both steer. BMW is going to say we're the ultimate driving machine because our steering is better. So the agency business that we're in is still a very competitive business where we're going to go up against another agency who in a pitch is going to show their fancy UI front end that's called Whizbang X, and it does all these great things, which you would say, well, I can go do all those same things with these three other off-the-shelf tools. I can go get the same outcome because I'm smart and I know how to use them than that agency that's built a UI on top of it. The difference is their product looks better, it smells better, it sells better, and we will lose in many cases to an agency that pitches that proprietary, I'm using air quotes, proprietary front end on top of something that they're going to claim is going to produce a better outcome. And that's just the reality of business is business. And every competitive industry has people that find a different way to create something to sell, right? And so
here's my problem in what you're saying. Again, people package things and they sound fancy. I think where it fundamentally falls down for me, I think inherently that in and of itself isn't bad. I mean, look, we build things. Like building something, I'm not saying that's the problem. I think as you're talking, what's coming into my mind that is where I fundamentally typically have a problem. And again, I can't make overarching sweeping statements here. I will leave room for error. Not everything will fall in this, but I would say, in my opinion, the majority of things that tend to go wrong with this, and it's what I saw in the programmatic space and all these other things that went through, is when you start to get to more efficient, easier, faster, and all of that, I'm going to use a word here, it's maybe not the right word, the inherent greed or the inherent nature of capitalizing on the opportunity that creates is instead of saying, now I can empower good, talented people to do better and more, it's I can empower cheaper, faster, easier talent to do good enough. And that's where it starts to become very problematic to me. It just tends to turn into, because we have this, we now only need this, and no one knows the difference or it's good enough in there. Because it's rare that it's like, okay, let's elevate and let's pick this up and use it to its full advantage because now it's stepping our game up in there. Again, not sweeping, but I'm saying more often than not, far too often, that's the case that I find being made is we have this cool thing and therefore it saves money, makes it easier. We do all of these things, or we can benefit from not having to have 5 people do it because now one person can do it. And instead of the clients benefiting from that, or instead of the output being better, we get to take advantage of that. And that's where it falls apart. If it's elevating, the thing I love the most about AI is it elevates great into spectacular and spectacular into unbelievable and all that. But I find there's too much conversation around it being replacing talent or making it easier, faster, or getting things done. I've seen this before where it's like, we're looking at the simplest output of what it can do versus really tapping into the really great fact, because that's the hard thing. That's the more expensive thing. That's the bigger thing. And it's just, I don't know what it is about human nature that tends to gravitate that way.
Well, let me hopefully maybe share some good information from you. So you weren't in this conference, but one of the overarching themes of everyone in this conference was, in objection to what you're saying, they are saying that it still requires smart humans and ingenuity of human minds and nuance to power. Again, maybe we're in this era of human powered era AI. A lot of the agencies did talk about how they are charging more. So I heard more about what you're talking about. I think we've already passed the point of AI being perceived. And I even heard there were brand people, there were marketing people from brands on some of these panels, and they too were acknowledging that this is not making things cheaper and faster in most ways. They are enhancing what you're talking about. They're giving humans superpowers now to do even more amazing work, but it's still a lot of work. And in many cases, it is costing more. I will say on the creative side of things, that's where I heard where cost efficiencies were coming in. A lot of the creative agencies were talking about how quickly and how cheaply now they can spin up mood boards and storyboards. And in their cases, they were very much saying it is a cost savings. They don't have to physically, go do something like that. But I think on the data and analytics side of things, it's certainly not allowing us to cut corners. It is creating more content, more information for us to sift through. So the last thing I want to bring up, I guess the final two things that I was most excited about, and I'm curious what your opinion is again, the idea of synthetic personas and the idea of creative analysis or competitor analysis. When companies were demoing their front-end UIs on this stuff, a lot of what they were demoing was market research, being able to create research-based insights off of synthetic personas that were trained off of broad swaths of either third-party data and or the best ones were fully trained by their client-side first-party data. Nobody really got into the privacy or any of that dialogue about that, which I thought was interesting. So just think for a second about having a synthetic audience you can create, and you can ask it anything to validate or test anything you're thinking about or optimize, and then think about having a system where you can take large swaths of ad creative and also query a system to say, well, tell me what colors with what product shot and what background and what foreground and what call to action is going to produce the best outcome. And the engine can do that because it can look at, I don't know, maybe millions of advertising ads. My question is, are you already finding value? And do you think that kind of framework built on top of LLMs in a media, and this is very a media and analytics specific question, is it going to give us media and analytics sort of companies better optimization, quicker optimization? Do you think it will allow us to react quicker? So if you have a synthetic persona, right, and you have ad creative coming from the creative team, do you believe if you throw that ad creative set versus how we used to focus group test things, if you throw that to the synthetic persona and ask it what it thinks about it, would it buy the product, how does it compare to the previous ads or whatever? Do you believe that is a usable framework?
It reduces the learning curve, right? I'm going to keep using analogies here, and I'm going to use your sports analogy. It's toe-in surfing, right? You still have to be able to ride it, but it's going to get you started. It's going to push you in. It's really going to allow you to ride a bigger wave and be in a better thing. But you still have to be able to use what's available to you really effectively and iterate and apply it and deploy it, because everything you get, it's still a hypothesis telling you what color, what images, what should and shouldn't work. It's still a hypothesis. Human behavior is still human behavior. It's not a guarantee everything that worked before, which is what data sets are, will work in the future, or that the environment and the conditions are the same. But it gives you guidance and directions and stress tests, and you can go through multiple iterations and lean into things that inform it better than just a single person. So yes, it's a huge, huge assist, but you still have to be prepared to use it and be effective with it overall.
If tomorrow you had a synthetic persona that was trained on third-party data and a client's first-party historical data, let's say a year's worth of e-commerce data or whatever from a particular client or whatever, if you had that and you had a synthetic persona built and you had maybe 2 or 3 different sets of ad creative and you ran it through the synthetic persona and it told you which one it favored and all that, would you feel 100% confident going live and going to market with that based on simply a synthetic persona output?
Yes, but that's one step in a process, because you build a brilliant campaign to prove that hypothesis. You then collect real outcome data and you compare it back to the hypothesis and the expectation, and you look at the delta, and then you have to make the next decision. What matched, what didn't? If it didn't match, what was the variables? What went wrong? It's just simply empowering a bigger engine that has to exist that takes all the talent. It is making that so much better, because now maybe instead of having to test 10 different things to get to those data sets in there, maybe you got to the best 3 or simplified or streamlined it out and all of those, and you have those data sets. So yeah, I mean, you inform it, you go through, and it brings you to the best decisions you can make to go through on that. But again, you still have to have the team and the energy and the creativity and the willingness to go through the steps and the process and deploy all the outcomes. Again, there's not just this press a button. Well, according to you, Agentic AI is saying that it does, but you don't just press a button and it all just happens for you. You sit back and go, well, that was great.
I'm not saying that exists. I don't think that exists yet, at least not in our industry. And again, just to be clear, no one in this conference was lobbying for things being, autonomous, faster, cheaper, replacing jobs. What I heard was the opposite. So I think that's validating what you're saying, is I did not hear the opposite of that.
And look, ultimately, I think where we diverge is, and I'm not fully against you in it, I just don't buy into the level of hype and specialness that is tried to be built around that. But look, I understand that's the nature of marketing. You hype things up, you build it up, you have to sell it, you have to create value. So I'm not totally putting it down, but where it falls apart for me is again, if there is something of value and it's useful, the idea that I built, quote unquote, or now I'm doing the air quotes, the quote unquote, I built something that is unique to me that no one else can do. I think it's disingenuous, because again, if someone's willing to do it, if you're willing to pay and go through the process, someone's really good at what they do, they'll figure it out. I'm going to try and use one last analogy on it in my mind, right? I believe that the most fundamental value is being the world's best carpenter, the person that can build and has a vision and can put it together. I don't think that carpenter needs to go build new hammers and table saws and things like that. I think if you're great, you go and find the best tools for the job and you put those tools to use for the outcomes you want. And I would be in the business of finding people who sell me that they are world-class carpenters, not that they have the latest and greatest hammer and saw that'll make it so much easier to build my house. That's the world that I think about, is I believe in experts who are capable of putting thought in and finding the best things and applying and mixing and matching it to the best outcomes, versus saying, I built this new paint by numbers, build a house, and that's the best thing that you should buy, and it's better than anything else you can get. It's a difference in philosophy. Like, there are things that work on that. But for me, it's more about that skill set and the talent to say what one tool is built for may be really good for one use case. It may not be the best possible tool for the next client that comes along. And now, as an agency, if I spent all that time and money and energy building a tool for one vision, and I get a new client that doesn't fit that vision, guess what? I'm probably going to force them into my tool because I've invested. I'm not going to go spend the time to go find the best one for them, because that's not in my best interest anymore. I spent too much time building my tool. Now everything's got to fit my tool. And I just don't see that being the best way for things to be done. I think you want a bunch of brilliant carpenters that look at the unique needs of a client and say, we are great at what we do. We're going to go find everything you need, and we're great at using that, and we're going to put it to use and solve your needs, because your needs are different than that client and that client and that client over there. You are not all the same.
I love that. We can end on that. I'm going to go create a synthetic version of myself and ask myself questions and talk to myself and see how that works out. Good debate, good chats. There's a lot going on in this space. There's some things I'm excited by. There's some things I'm like you. I think they're being made to look more than what they are, just for the sake of marketing services companies being able to claim they have something unique that sells well. It's packaged and merchandised well, and it sells well, and it looks different and unique than the other two agencies that, might have presented something. And anyway, so appreciate it. Love it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Contrary to Popular Opinion, where we challenge you to think independently, push the limits, and take uncommon action so you can achieve game-changing results in your business and your life. To stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to click the follow or subscribe button now. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.